Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Run in the Paint recap. I'm Miles here with Nick. Nick, how are you doing today?
Good man. I was able to catch the second half of a close game in the first half, and then I watched OKC, blow it to bits there in the second half. It was incredible to watch them, go on a 17-2 run and just take it over.
Yeah, last night we had game one of the Western Conference Finals between OKC and Minnesota. And yeah, OKC ended up winning this one by a lot, 114 to 88 to take game one. But this was not as much of a blowout as the final score ended up showing. For a large portion of the game, actually in the first half, Minnesota came out and played great. They played great defense, really on every single Thunder player. I mean, to start the game, they were having a rough time guarding Shea because they were sending him to the free throw line. But once they stopped fouling him, they really had a very good first half. And of course, Julius Randle was unbelievable to start the game. He had 20 points in the first half. Really couldn't miss a shot there for a while. But it was a tale of two halves, man. And
Tale
in
of
the
two
second half,
halves.
OKC just took over.
No, yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. Tale of two halves. What you had asked me in the pre-lobby was what I wanted to focus on, and well, the big things that stuck out were the bench scoring for Minnesota. Nas Reed and Nikhil Alexander Walker. excuse me, and excuse me, and Dante DiVincenzo. I'm sorry. Uh, did not show up. They just didn't hit shots, and the turnovers for Minnesota were also a big problem. So those were my big takeaways from what I saw. I mean, everything that Minnesota goes with is with Ant, and he didn't even get a bucket in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, besides Randall in the first half, it was a pretty lackluster performance across the board, offensively for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is kind of why it was so crazy that they, had the lead in the first half. It really was on the back of Randall, and OKC generally had a pretty bad first half themselves as well. I mean, the fact that they were only down by 4 points at halftime, that was kind of the big point at the halftime break was like, all right, OKC, they've shot really poorly. Everyone's kind of shooting bad. Randall's going crazy, hitting all these tough shots, and we're only down by four. Our defense is keeping us in this game. If we can just, get going a little bit, force some more turnovers, get out in the open court, then we should be fine to take over this game. And in the second half, no one no one really showed up for Minnesota. I mean, you mentioned everyone really struggled, especially those bench guys, and that was going to be a super important thing coming into this series was how the Timberwolves bench players were going to play in Reed, DiVincenzo, and Alexander Walker. And all three of them had a very negative impact on the game. And, honestly, to me, it was really just because they were missing a bunch of shots. I mean, Minnesota took 53s in this game. What did you think about the shot diet of the Timberwolves in game one?
Well, like I said, I only got to watch the second half, and I heard in the first half that they had taken like 28 or so, and only scored 48 points. So I thought the volume was very high considering the fact that they didn't have a whole lot of number of points on the board. But I also had heard what Mark D said at halftime, and we're only down by four, and we had all that go against us. But I thought the same was also true for Minnesota. Like they had their defense kept them in the game, and their bench guys weren't playing great. Ant hadn't really gotten going, and they were up by four. So I thought both teams were in a good spot, but it was really the Thunder who, like I said in the beginning of the pod, took control and dominated the second half. Uh, I think they outscored Minnesota 32-20 or so in the third quarter after only scoring 44 points in the entire first half. Like Minnesota's defense was smothering at least in the last 3 minutes of the third quarter, in the second quarter, and when I got to watch the first couple minutes of the third, I was like, okay, Shea's only 2 for 13. Like this is the recipe for them to, take game one on the road, but the Thunder were just able to overcome it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the start to the third quarter and the end of the second period, kind of when you first started watching. Minnesota was continuing to play well, but that was when OKC started to kind of get back into the game. I mean, we talked about during in the pre-pod lobby how Minnesota had a 9-point lead in the final minute. of the second quarter, and suddenly it turns into a 26 point, loss for them in this game one. What changed for OKC just to in that third quarter to really get them exploding and blow the game wide open?
I don't know. You might be able to answer that better than me because I didn't get to see them, not playing well. I saw J Dub hit some big shots. I don't want to mess up the player's name. He's the light skinned dude with a buzz cut and current.
Oh, Kenrich Williams.
Exactly. He hit a big shot for them. I mean, he played some impact minutes, and Shea hit some ridiculous and ones in the second half that, like I said, the offense was just able to overcome it. And what I really did notice was when the fourth quarter started, they were already down by 10 after a really poor performance in the third quarter. And when the fourth quarter started, they had Ant on the bench along with Rudy. And I'm like, Rudy's minutes are going to be huge in this series because of Hartenstein and Chet. And having both of them on the bench when you're already down 10 is really rough.
Yeah, and Anthony Edwards was on the bench with foul trouble, had 4 fouls, picked them up in the third quarter. He also turned his ankle in the first half, so we'll see if I'm sure he'll be good to go for game 2, but yeah, I mean, the Thunder just made those momentum plays in the second half, and a lot of them were off of the Minnesota turnovers. I mean, you mentioned J-Dub, he had 19 points in this game, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 steals. Those were all huge. He nearly had a couple more very active in the passing lanes and getting out in the open court. Shea, of course, making big shots. The Kenrich Williams card. There are some weird things that occurred in this game rotation wise. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. We saw Kenrich Williams play spot minutes and he hit a couple threes, had 8 points. I mean, that came out of nowhere. Isaiah Joe played more in this game. He hit a big three. He had 8 rebounds, which is huge for a guy that's really just out there to shoot the ball. And on the other side of things, again, the Timberwolves just didn't have those players that made those impact plays in the third quarter, and OKC really just exploded. But to start off the fourth quarter, I think that Chet Holmgren was huge to start off the fourth quarter. He had a bunch of dunks right inside off of good ball movement, and he was being a lot more patient in the second half than he was first to start the game. It looked like he was getting a little bit rattled by Randall and Gobert down there. We thought that that might happen with those two big guys bullying him down there to start the game. But in the fourth quarter, one of the best quarters of his career to start off with I think he had 9 points in the fourth quarter. Had some dunks, had a big three. Of course, the defense is always there. So, I mean, OKC just had more players, give an impact for them. And when you're Minnesota, a team that's on the road against number one seeded OKC, the fact you didn't get any impact players in the second half, that's just not gonna get it done.
Yeah, I don't think we can go and talk about impact players without mentioning at least Alex Caruso. He was a huge impact player in this game on the defensive end. I think he had a big three late too that pushed the lead from 12 to 15 or so and kind of put the nail in the coffin. But you're absolutely right about Chet's minutes in the fourth. I mean, RJ was on the broadcast talking about, his patience and how he just wasn't trying to rush or like, force anything at the rim, was just taking it as it came to him. And they had to go away from iHeart down there in the second half towards because he was in foul trouble as well. He had 4 fouls, and looking at his plus minus, he was only +1 for the entire game after starting and playing well in the first half. But they had to go away from him there, and Chet stepped up.
Yeah, OKC wanted to get faster, and it worked. I mean, it obviously worked in that second half. We kind of saw them also do a smaller sort of lineup in a game 7 against Denver, which was honestly kind of similar to this. The Thunder get off to a slower start at home and then pick it up as the game goes along here. But yeah, man, Minnesota, they're just going to need a lot of these players to just play better. Even though I don't think they had a brutal game as a team just because of the defensive, style they played in the first half and the fact that Randall shot the ball so well, so I think that really in their case going into game 2, their guys are just going to have to play a lot better. But the number one thing for me is they need to keep the Thunder and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander off the free throw line, and that is something that's way easier said than done. But another key thing we talked about heading into this series was the potential foul trouble that the, best perimeter defenders on Minnesota could get into. And we saw that with Edwards picking up the 4 fouls, at that point in the third quarter, and McDaniels fouling out in just 23 minutes. Though that's going to be very important that those guys can stay on the floor in this series.
Yeah, I mean, that goes along with personal fouls, bench scoring, and turnovers. I mean, those are three things that if you're not going to be on the right side of those battles against a team that's loaded like this, then not going to help your case.
Yeah, looking at the turnovers, Minnesota had 17 turnovers and only 18 assists on the game. There just wasn't a whole lot of extra ball movement. There was a lot of just getting into pick and rolls with Edwards and Gobert, and Edwards pulling up for a three, or Conley with a floater, or Randall isolation. And the few times where they got to moving the basketball around and getting DiVincenzo and Reed 3-point looks, the Thunder were just swarming around. Their defensive rotations were fantastic, to where, it didn't matter that they kept moving the ball. The Thunder defense was right there, and Minnesota couldn't get that great of a shot.
Yeah, Minnesota wasn't able to, overcome the defense, and these are two of the best defensive teams in the league. And in the first half, Minnesota did enough to, stifle OKC, and then in the second half, despite OKC, continuing to swarm, well, not despite, but Minnesota wasn't able to overcome it. DiVincenzo, Walker, and Reed were combined 7 for 36, and DiVincenzo hit some tough ones that like could those weren't even. It could have been worse.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you don't think that those guys would shoot that worse? I mean, 7 for 36 from the field is pretty brutal, and a lot of those were 3-point, chucks at the rim as well. So looking ahead to game two here, after Minnesota loses this by 26, but played a pretty okay, 2.5 quarters there. What do you think is the biggest adjustment that Minnesota needs to make in order to get back in this series to win game two on the road?
Play a complete game and don't let OKC's identity on the defensive end of forcing turn. I really think that's what a big thing was. Like they came out of the third quarter and they didn't look like they were clicking on offense or sound. Or was it going to be Julius because he was hot, or were we going to try and get Ant going? And it just wasn't as smooth as it could have been. So I think those two things, playing a complete game on the defensive end and then figuring it out right out of the gate in the second half. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll also see if they'll continue with this sort of rotation with, they even threw in a Jalen Clark, the rookie, because he's had good defensive games against OKC this year. We'll see if they give him more minutes to see if he can, provide that defense. Although I mean everyone overall did a pretty good job on SGA. He just got to the foul line a bunch and made some very tough shots.
Yeah. The other thing, like you said, just thinking back to your question, was keeping OKC off the foul line, not giving up easy ones.
You can't give them easy buckets. I mean, the two easiest buckets you could probably get are layups and free throws, and Thunder got a lot of them in this game.
Yeah.
So we'll see how Minnesota can handle game two back in OKC. For the Thunder's perspective, obviously, they win this game handily going away here. I mean, it seems like they've been doing this all season long, where you think that you're in the game for a good, 2, 3 quarters. You look up at the scoreboard after 48 minutes and it's a 25 plus point victory. But it doesn't shy away from the fact that OKC did play a pretty lackluster first 2 quarters. So what do they need to adjust to in game two in order to make sure that they don't get off to another slow start, because they've had a couple slow starts in these last couple of games.
I'm not really sure because, like I talked about in the pod that we had yesterday, you can't deny or you can't deny the sort of anxiety of stepping onto the court in the Western Conference Finals when you haven't been there before. So in the first 2 quarters, you might want to like chalk it up to that or attribute some of the missed shots and poor performance to just not having been there before. So
Yeah, very, very true.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe the adjustment is no adjustment.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, he wasn't willing to reveal any adjustments in the post game interview to Lisa Salters or anyone. So we'll see. We'll see if they have any heading into game two. Um, we'll see if they end up if Minnesota tries to force OKC into taking more threes. I mean, the Thunder only took 21 threes. They made most of them, but those were the few open looks that they got. I think the Thunder did a great job of just taking what the Timberwolves defense gave them in that mid-range area, which is the toughest shot to make, with Shea and J-Dub right there. But overall, impressive performance from OKC, taking game one by 26 points. Looking ahead to tonight, we've got game one of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. That is going to be at 8 o'clock on TNT. That incredible series. I just cannot wait for that one to start. Nick, what are some things that you are looking for in specifically game one to kick off that series?
It's gonna be electric in Madison Square Garden. Really just that atmosphere and seeing how the Pacers sort of respond to it because, like you said, this is the team that's looked like the best team in the playoffs all year, or all for the last couple of weeks, and just gonna be interested to see who gets broken first. Like, see if Cat can hold up, and if that Knicks defense is gonna be able to like keep up with the Pacers, or if the Pacers are gonna like succumb to the moment and be intimidated by Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I think that we talked about it. The identity piece is something that's so important in this series. And I think Indiana knows, even though they've been playing, so well, this is a brand new series against the Knicks team that also has been playing at their best. And I think the Pacers also remember last year, where even though they won the series in 7 games, they did lose the first 2 games in Madison Square Garden. And you don't want to go down 0-2 to start. So I think that both teams are going to be ready to start that series. But either way, just cannot wait for it. Again, that's tonight. 8 o'clock on TNT. But that's it for us here. Nick, you have anything else before we get out of here?
I do think that Indiana could get some power from using the thought like, hey, well, it's not Boston, and they it could be like at least it's not Boston, so there might be some confidence in that.
And they should be extremely confident with how they've played. And I also think, I mean, there is probably some confidence too. Like, hey, we just took care of the number one seed in the East all season long pretty handily, going up against, a worse Knicks team, or at least, that's how it was all season long. So there definitely is going to be a confidence piece there. But yeah, we'll see how how Reggie Miller is able to broadcast in that atmosphere, that inside the NBA crew. Going to New York City to kick off their final series. I can't wait to see what happens with that as well.
Yes, sir. Be back tomorrow to talk about it.
Yes, sir. We will be back to talk game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe for more NBA postseason content. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you in the next one.
Peace.